Hello, everybody. Welcome to Google Authors Program event. We're excited today to welcome Daniel Vosovic, who I hope you all remember from season 2 of Project Runway. Daniel was one of the 3 finalists, and he presented a 13-piece collection at New York's Fashion Week to glowing reviews.
Oh, thank you, so sweet.
And lately he's been collaborating with the stylish hotel chain Nilo, and where he's designing chic and modern staff uniforms.
Among other things.
Yeah. And he's been holding off on producing a signature line, so we all have to wait, but he's continuing to work and assist other well-known designers in the fashion industry. So please join me in welcoming Daniel.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Can you guys hear me all right? Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you, by the way, for having me. I'm very honored to be invited. So, as you heard, the past few years since season 2 of Project Runway, have been focusing on what I've wanted to do and sort of getting this career and this business off the ground. So, before I get into that, I wanted to give you guys, since we have the time and you guys are stuck in a room with me, a little more background about where I came from and what you guys may or may have not seen on the show. And so for me, I grew up in Michigan from a very nice family, very Midwest mom and dad upbringing. And so my fashion experience was very, very limited. So I had Chicos, I had Talbots, I'm very serious. I had like my sister's dance costumes, and that was sort of like my first exposure into fashion, which was the term was used very loosely. And I was also a gymnast, starting at 7 years old, and worked out a ridiculous amount for like 6 days a week, 4 hours a day, and that was my life until I was 18. And I really had no exposure to fashion or to design aside from stuff that I had taken at like local art classes. So art history, painting, drawing. I always knew how to draw, but never was exposed, never had even tried drawing a fashion figure or anything remotely chic. So after numerous surgeries and a lot of metal in my body, I said, you know what, I'm 18 years old, I have to kiss these tens of thousands of dollars of scholarships goodbye to a Big Ten school. I was planning to go into architecture, which to me was a much safer career than fashion. And with that door closing, sort of had to make a choice, not only about my college career, but about my career in general, and say, well, if I'm not going to go into architecture, what am I going to do? And I had no money, and I begrudgingly went to a community college in Michigan I ended up staying there for 3 years, and I took my first architecture class and hated it. I hated how a project would take 1.5 to 2 years to finish. I hated the idea of like I could build a wall wrong and someone would die. And like, no, seriously, and I'm like, I can do a seam wrong and it's not that big of a deal. So I said that first semester is done, I'm over this, I hate it. And I was like, I'm not gonna wake up when I'm 40 and hate my job. So I took a sewing course, kind of just on a whim, didn't really tell my parents, didn't really tell anyone. I wanted to test the waters. And I loved it. And I went from making boxer shorts to cocktail dresses in like weeks. And it just clicked in my head. And I understood how things worked. I could envision the process and how you could go from just imagining, thinking about something to like seeing it on your body. And I can't explain it any more than that. And I started, like the kids around me and the other people in the class, who was like 50-year-old home sewing moms and like the punk rock kids who like thought fashion was like slashing and safety pinning everything. And it was like the beginning of a community. And I was 18 at the time, and I thought, you know what, if I'm gonna be here, let's make the best of this. And I began to sort of build this community where I thought, well, she's a great sewer. I know how to make this pattern. Like, I know you only know how to make pot holders, but have you ever thought about making this jacket before? And then the beautiful 5'10" model who's, you know, she grew out of her lanky phase, and I'm thinking, have you ever thought about modeling before? And the photographer friend, and blah, blah, blah. So long story very short, I ended up staging this very, very large charity fashion show 2 years in a row for HAS, which is it's an HIV/AIDS prevention network in the Midwest, and we ended up raising like $24,000, and it's a bunch of like 19, 20-year-old kids pulled this huge thing together. Media started to get excited. Local stores started to think, oh wow, there's young designers here, and the idea of fashion design became much more approachable and much more of an of a reality for not only me but for other young designers. And I've actually heard since then that local schools have not only beefed up their fashion programs, but have started fashion programs. So thank you very much. So I'm very happy, yeah. I'm very happy for that. So I ended up finally making it to FIT in New York City. If you guys have heard of that, it's the Fashion Institute of Technology. I did a one-year program where I almost died and lost 10 pounds, which I don't need to lose, and I ended up, in my first semester, I stayed awake for like 72 hours straight, and I thought, I'm never doing that again. I'm never doing that again. And the next semester, 79, and a friend of mine was like, you know what, you really can have seizures if you don't go to sleep. And I'm like, the portfolio needs to get done. I'm not joking, like not a wink of sleep. And FIT in New York in general, if you guys are familiar with design or what's happening with American fashion designers, we're very much about utility and about technical design, and we love a good sportswear, we love a suit, we're very all-American, which is great. But I felt like to break molds, you need to learn more than that. So I applied to a sister school in Italy, moved to Florence for a year. I know, girl. It was good. Like I learned Italian, learned how to make my own pasta. It really especially like having, I don't know if it's because I'm an Aries or I feel like I'm a New Yorker now, but like the idea of like taking 3 hours for dinner, like to not feel guilty about that, and to like go and experience things and fell in love for the first time, and it was just like so ridiculous. And welcome, come on in. Oh. He's like, wrong author, sorry. We don't want you. And really just started to appreciate design and the idea that you learn the things and then you get rid of all the rules that you've ever learned. And that's what makes design interesting. That's what Google, I mean, like you take something that is created out of nothing because there's a need for it or no one thought that they needed it. And so it really helped to beef up my design perspective and sort of who I am as a designer and how I design. Moved to London after that, worked in a great showroom there, learned more about business, and then moved back to New York finally to finish my bachelor's program at FIT. So that last year at FIT was, if anyone who's gone through school, which I'm sure most of you have, you know that there's a point when it's less about projects, it's less about just getting what the professor wants, and it's more about you as a person and you as a potential designer, you as a potential web designer, or whatever it is that you guys do. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I'm graduating in 9 months. This is it. Like, I'm done. And like in the design world, you guys, like 1 out of 200 kids, like I graduated with a few hundred, 5 of us are working in the industry. 5. Like it's very, very competitive. And I started to build this community yet again from what I had started back in Michigan and said, like, wow, the textile department, she's building new textiles by hand. Why don't we work on an outfit together? And then the jewelry designer needed a body to build, to put something on. I said, this is a great idea. And I started to continue to build this network and this foundation where it saved my butt and it got me on Project Runway 4 days after I graduated. Because I had started that process beforehand, I wasn't left with school projects. I was left with, oh, this is me as a designer. And I think if you guys have watched Project Runway, you see a lot of times, and I know from being on the panel, like the term schoolwork, and Tim is like looking down on his glasses and he's like, this looks like student work. And it does. And it's, for you guys as viewers, I don't know if any of you are even interested in fashion, but the idea of really honing what design is and really pushing it forward and not just doing it for the sake of doing it. Because the reality is, you guys, like, we don't need more clothes. Like, none of us need more clothes. My job as a designer, and I feel other designers, is it's our job to inspire you guys, to make you feel excited. And I know I feel sexy as hell when I put on a new blazer. Like when I put on a new suit and it makes like nice shoulders, and like when you put on a new dress or like a new shoe. And the thing is, like, they're pieces of fabric. Like, they're pieces of fabric sewn together. And for that to give you confidence, for that to make you feel sexy or whatever it is, or butch, I don't know, whatever you're into, I think that shouldn't be ignored. And I think that's a really great thing. And that's what pushes me as a designer is sort of, I know that there's a person behind the product. And to never forget that. So long story, again, very short. Was on Project Runway. If you watch the season, you know what happened. And I had to make a choice afterwards. I said, I have to either continue on this hype and this momentum that was being on a show like this has given me, or do I take a step back, and I'm 24 years old, do I go the path that I thought I was going to go, which is assisting, working under another designer? And it was very, very hard to sort of let all those whisperings go and to say, yo, people are going to forget about you. You know, it's very, very difficult. And I thought, you know what? I'd rather have a career where I know I can build a strong foundation that will last for decades and not a few seasons. Azzedine Alaya, are you guys familiar with who Alaya is? Some of you, a handful of you. Amazingly talented designer, couldn't get off the ground. He just can't keep, there's amazing talent out there, but if all those pieces aren't in order, so that's what I decided to do, is get my pieces in order. And that's what I've been doing for 3 years, which I'm happy to say. And as of fall of '09, should hopefully be the launch and the sustaining launch of my label. So that's very exciting for me. So since then, I've just been working. I was at larger labels, Kelvin, smaller labels, Raven, and have just sort of been continuing to build this network and this foundation for myself, and just being really selfish about it, because it's my name on the label. So since the show and whatnot, I've obviously been getting the nitty-gritty experience, but also like doing work which is still fun, like this book, work on TV shows like Lipstick Jungle and Gossip Girl, which is always fun, and the celebrity dressing, which they don't pay for, and all of the fun fluff that happens in fashion. So anyway, so this book, I was approached to write this book about 1.5 years ago from a publisher, sort of cold called me and said, I love your writing voice. I write a blog on Bravo every week, and she said, I love your writing voice. Have you ever thought about writing a book? And I said, I'm 26 years old. Like, what am I going to write a book about? And so the fabric idea came up about me wrapped in different fabrics. And I said, no, I'm kidding. And no, she wanted like a Rachel Ray, like, hey, welcome to Daniel V's, like. And I'm like, I can't do this. I can't. I'm sorry, Rachel. Like, yeah, exactly. I just can't. So the idea of where I'm at in my career and in my life, yes, there's a lot to learn, but there's also so much that I have learned. And one thing that's consistent, whether you're a designer selling your dress at a local 4-H or a designer fair, or you are presenting your collection to Barney's for the 50th time, the thing that's consistent, the thing that's the same with everyone is the process. And that is, every designer has a process. And that's what Fashion Inside Out is. To me, it's my process shown to you guys. And then you take that up, and it's about the process of fashion. I had a chance to interview over 24 people who are part of this industry, not just designers, because people have this big misconception, even with a show like Project Runway, where they think it's a designer and a sewing machine. And it's much more than that. And it's much more, the clothes that you guys are wearing today took a lot of work to get onto your backs and in the closets and in the stores that you guys shop at. So that's what Fashion Inside Out is about. Full title, obviously, don't we love it? How Style Happens, from Inspiration to Runway and Beyond. I feel like I look so fat. Oh, this one, like the image is really stretched out, so I look so fat. I'm like, ugh. This photo is actually, since we have the time, this photo was so funny. We were taking just like normal portrait shots, and all of a sudden I'm like, are we almost effing done with this? And he's like, hold it right there. And my art director loved it. So again, as I've said, fashion design at its most basic is an idea wrapped around the human body. That's my job as a designer, is to make something physical for you guys to be inspired by. Every process, whether you're a fashion designer or a web designer or an interior designer, whatever it is, it all starts with that spark of inspiration and sort of building off an idea, and it can be something physical. For me, it could be a girl on the street, it could be a movie, it could just be a moment, it could be a feeling, and sort of delving into that. I did a collection for the book which was inspired by nature and technology, and sort of living in Manhattan, living and working in the city, there's obviously not a lot of nature there. And this idea of like compartmentalization and taking something that's very cold and lifeless and making it more organic and making it something that's more tactile and approachable. Sorry. And obviously here you guys can see that there's a literal translation sometimes for designers where you can see something that it was very specific, and you can see in the final product, oh wow, that's where he got that idea. Other times you'll hear like, he was inspired by the hills of Moroccan, blah, 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 and you're like, it's a jumpsuit. I don't. Sorry, it's a little sluggish. Like I had said, I did close to 24 interviews in the book. Some names that you guys may know. Todd is a great guy and has a high-end taste, but also he's now the creative director of Old Navy. I love the product that Old Navy's doing right now. I think it's adorable. I think it's very smart. It's great. It's affordable. And then you have someone like Carl Aberg, who's been behind the scenes at Marc Jacobs for years, and they couldn't be more different in their product, but almost identical in the process. Isn't she sexy? I love him. DVF, she's been around for years. She came, she went, she's back with a vengeance, and she's just such an inspiration to me. You have the ideas in your head, you find the inspiration as a designer, how do you then make it something physical? The book obviously talks about the practicalities of putting that design onto paper, how to sketch, why fashion models are so tall and lanky, and why we like to draw on them. Fabrication, making those ideas more 3D. Fabrics, textiles. I know as a consumer, something can look beautiful if it doesn't feel right, if the color's a little off, you pass by it. There's a lot of thought that goes into every single garment that you guys look at or wear, and you need, as a designer, it's very important to know what that final product will look like and what that will feel like. As a designer, it's also important when you're competing with hundreds of other people and thousands of other people to have a point of view. And you guys have probably heard Nina, if you watch the show, say like, what's exactly your point of view? And I guess the best way for me to explain that is the way that you know a Gucci jacket is a Gucci jacket, or the way that you know a Liz Taylor suit is a great Liz Taylor suit. And you need, or Liz Taylor? Liz Claiborne, yeah. And yeah, Elizabeth Taylor's diamond earrings are, no. And sort of the point of view about, even if Daniel Vosovic does a t-shirt, it needs to look like the Daniel Vosovic t-shirt. And that's something that I think a lot of young designers, it's easy to replicate what the big guys are doing. It's much harder to find your own point of view and your own voice. For me, Anna's one of my best friends. I've known this girl for years, since like years back in Michigan, and we both live in the city now. And as a designer, it's important to have, whether that woman is a real person, it could just be an idea, but to have that person, that vision of who you're designing for. What does her jacket look like? If she went to work, what does her suit look like? Or her evening gown, what does her wedding dress look like? And that's something that we think about in the design process when we're still working. Editors like Nina Garcia and fashion journalists like Lauren David, they see hundreds of design. There was 150 shows on New York's fashion schedule just last season. New York. Then you have London, and then you have Milan, and then you have Paris, and then you might have LA, then you have India, there's Berlin. There's fashion weeks all over the world, and for a designer to stand out and to make, they're ultimately promoting us, you need to stand out to them as well as to you guys. So they're still the buffer between us and you. Because I guarantee you guys aren't, like, you guys don't have tickets to Fashion Week, right? Okay, good. Yeah, exactly. We'll talk after. This was a great day for the book. We went around the city and just shot what I call style on the street. And this is just a representation of what I was saying about a point of view for young people who I think all have great personal style, but they couldn't be more different. And the ideas that say Sid wouldn't wear the same thing as Ellie. And the idea that brand recognition and sort of personal style is something that I think is very important to people nowadays. I don't think people dress head to toe in designers, and I think as designers, we don't necessarily design one-stop shopping. I don't think people do that anymore. Even say like Ralph Lauren, I don't think you always wear Ralph Lauren head to toe. Innovation is a very important thing for young designers as well, and I think a lot of stuff with like technology, I think with fabrications, I think that's really where a lot of innovation in fashion is going. I don't think we need to see the 50s rehashed again or the 40s rehashed again. And I think that it's very interesting to see where technology is going with presentations, with online presentations that say, instead of traditional fashion shows or fabrications and the ideas of sustainable fabrics becoming fashionable. I think that that's where young designers are focusing. You then have these ideas, you now got to make it something physical. And obviously the book takes you through draping and pattern making and the thoughts, the stuff that you guys see in a 30-second snippet on Project Runway takes hours and days and numerous fittings, and it's definitely a process. But the book does dissect a little more into it. So if you are a designer, hopefully there's something you can learn from, but if you're not, you'll understand that it goes a lot faster or a lot slower than on Project Runway. Design details, I know that I've bought a blazer because I love the lining, or a great jean had a horrible zipper that just didn't work. And the thing is, as a designer, it's important to step back, go forward, like very, very focused, and then take a step back. Our job is to grab your attention in the midst of a store floor, but also for you guys to get excited when you put that jacket on, or you go home maybe, and you say, oh, that's a nice surprise. Pattern makers are geniuses and are definitely the sort of unsung heroes in the design process. They're the ones that make the great fit, or a lot of times as designers, we just sketch something really loose and fluid, and the pattern maker's job is to figure it out. You guys may not even know what a pattern maker is, or maybe not have even heard the term. They're the ones that are the nitty-gritty people. They're the ones who are making the stuff physical. This is the fun stuff. This is the stuff that you guys see in fashion magazines, TV shows like Rachel Zoe, which makes me want to barf. And this is like, these are the $500 shoes. These are the fun jewelry, the hair, the makeup. But I know as even a consumer, when you're flipping through a magazine, I guarantee that you flip through a magazine like this. Now, you have to remember how much time went into making that ad, that bag, that color, that fabrication. There's a lot of work that went into that. And I know even as a consumer myself, as a reader of magazines, that sometimes I just don't even care. Stylists like James, who's a very good friend of mine, he actually just finished styling Madonna's tour, and that's a lot of story. But my job, I know one of my weaknesses as a designer, I know that I have a hard time self-editing, and I think it's important to know what a designer's strengths and weaknesses are. And a stylist like James, his job is to go to those, to be aware of what's happening right now, where maybe MIA or Madonna or something, she wore something new, it's a new trend, it's going to hit, or Surrey Cruz wore a new, whatever, which I think is kind of sick, but just the idea that it is a designer, it's my job to focus on the small things and the actual process of getting those garments made. A stylist is sometimes very important and pulled on as a creative director even during the design process so that they can stay more on the pulse. They just get to go to all the parties and have all the fun stuff. Again, another thing, yes, a beautiful woman is a beautiful woman, is a beautiful guy, but that's almost as insulting to me as being like, oh yeah, that jacket looks just like another jacket I've seen. And our job as designers is to really make a moment to make you guys stop for maybe an extra 5 seconds on a page or in a store to actually put the coat on or the dress on. And people like Jose, who's a model scout, deals with hundreds of thousands of girls who all want to compete for that 5 seconds. People like Heidi Klum, who's been around in the industry for years, for decades. She'll tell you that she was told, you don't really have the look that we want. And all of us look at her and we're like, really? She's stunning. But she even knows the importance of making a designer's look come to life. And that's what their job is. And without them, we would just have hangers. Fashion photography, another element that I know before I started studying it, I took for granted. I think there's a big difference between just a snapshot and something that's much more thought out. This is Michael Turek, who I met back at FIT, actually. He was a recent graduate of a school in New York and wrote a mass email to one of my professors and said, do you have any young designers who are looking to have their workshop for free, which is something that's kind of common in our industry. And I was the only one out of 150 kids that responded. And I thought, this is great. He's going to give me free photos. Why not? And that then turned into Nilo ad campaign, turned into Dirt and Tess shoots. He shot this whole book, and I just absolutely love the guy. And I love growing with people. I think it's always easy for young designers to want to or young people to attach themselves to the big guys or the ones that are established. But I think it's much more interesting to work and grow with people. Actually, yeah, and if you guys remember the photo I showed of stylist James, the great thing is like, and even Anna, the long blonde-haired girl, she is now, after like 6 weeks graduating, now the head accessory designer for all Marc Jacobs collection shoes. And for Marc by Marc, James, like I said, is styling Madonna. He shoots very, very big magazine covers. And these are kids that I went to school with. Like I love watching my friends grow with me. And I think it's very important to have that community. Other fashion photographers and their point of view. This is something that you guys never really see on Project Runway or really aren't exposed to aside from shopping yourselves. Things like a designer's portfolio when they're looking for a job, for example. The book delves a little into that. Other options besides Fashion Week. To rent a tent, a base tent at Fashion Week, $40,000. That's not hair, that's not makeup, that's not models, lighting, photography, PR. It's nothing. And the idea, the misconception that anyone can sort of, I mean, you see people like Lauren Conrad like show a line and it's like, oh, wow, anyone can do it. Or should do it. This is going on YouTube, isn't it? You guys, I think if you've been watching Project Runway, have been exposed to Fern Malice, who is sort of the godmother of Fashion Week and created the idea that all of this should come together in one big unit. And without people who have that forward thinking, Fashion Week wouldn't be what it is, or fashion wouldn't be what it is. People like Lee Trimble are amazing at networking young designers with factories or with buyers. And a lot of those people you guys may never have heard about. Headhunters like Elizabeth. I love her quote, you have to just get out there and meet the PR people, you meet the stylists and network with your instructors. Network with all of your friends who are designers and don't pass up the opportunity to have a conversation. It's the simplest sentence and I can't repeat how much it saved my own butt. You never pass up a conversation. And at the end of the day, I do have to remember that amidst all the chaos and the late bills and the screaming at factories in Italy and all of this stuff, fashion is about people, and I know that everyone who works in this industry has a life and has a job and has a family, And you guys, you buy fashion to excite yourself, to make you feel special and exciting. This was for Anna. In the book, if you guys flip through, you'll see Anna actually had to pose in a leotard. And I was like, it's going to be everywhere in the world. And in exchange, I had to make her a dress for her birthday party. So, oh, that's my little boyfriend. Oh, he's so cute. The book totally became an excuse of like, how many friends can I get in the book? So yeah, so that is the end of my presentation. But if you guys have any questions or anything, I'd be more than happy to answer anything. Yeah.
So it was very interesting to hear that you at least sort of considered architecture at first. What do you think are the connections, if any, between fashion and architecture?
I think three-dimension. I think just the fact that you're creating something three-dimensional and structure is very important to me. I love jackets and I love coats and how they can sort of transform a woman's body without feeling restricting, not corsetry or stuff like that. And I find a lot of inspiration in architecture, personally. And I know that I actually don't subscribe to any fashion magazines. I look through French Vogue and ID and a few other high-end magazines, but I think it's a trap for young designers to look at other designers' work that's already out there, because by the time you're in your brainstorming phase, it's already been done. My ideal inspiration places are architecture magazines, are walking around the city, are nature magazines. Like, that's where I find my inspiration. And then you make it something physical and relating to fashion. And I love the idea that, like, us or a painter or a shoe designer or anyone you can all start with that same idea and come up with completely separate ideas. And I think that's what's so exciting. You know, people sometimes ask me, young designers, well, I'm kind of feeling stagnant right now. I don't know where to look. And I said, well, then you need to either make new friends, you visit somewhere else. Like, you need to be self-indulgent to let yourself be inspired. Sorry, that totally veered into something else. So, but I hope that answered it. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a question about Project Runway, because it's one of my favorite shows. I watched
Oh, excellent.
But okay, so when you're just watching the show as a viewer, you see, you guys all in the room together, and you guys go to Mood, and you've got your fabrics, and Tim's like, make it work, bye. And deadline's at midnight. Is that really true? Do you really only have like from 8 a.m. to midnight?
We actually have even less.
Really?
Yeah, because you know the confessionals? They're an hour and a half in between. So like, oh my gosh, you guys, it was hell. It was so bad. Like, I loved my time, but it was crazy. And so like, say there's 5 of us designers left, and it's like you have 8 hours to make a dress. So like, you would go first, second, third, fourth, and I'm like, crap. So I'd have to finish an hour and a half early because you don't want to get that last slot, because as soon as you get back to the workroom, you pack up and go. So it was very, very tricky. And it wasn't the hardest thing wasn't designing a dress in 8 hours. It was designing a dress in 8 hours on top of all of it, on top of living with people who you may like or not like, being told when to eat, being told when to go to sleep. Like, we were on 6 hours a night, like, at best. Because like, it's a TV show. Like, you can stop working, but then you're taped walking home. You're taped going to bed. Your tape lighting has to be set, et cetera, et cetera. So then they take your mic off and they wake you up the next morning.
And I've never seen, and one of the weird things, now that you say that, is I've never seen somebody not finish. I mean, there's
Oh.
that aren't finished, but
No, there's a lot to hide on TV, and we learned that real fast.
everyone has something to show on the runway, though. I've never
Yes.
heard anybody say, I don't have anything to show.
But there's like a girl this season that had to drink the fabric under her jacket.
Yeah.
That's
Oh, yeah.
true. We took it off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's be honest, yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot of double-sided tape.
There's a lot of double-sided tape, and people would learn, like, and there's been arguments there's been arguments with designers on the runway. I remember I had an issue with my season with Santino where he ended up staying, and I knew how much of this jumpsuit was taped together, and it was ridiculous. And I'm like, this is like, no, like, you need to be, like, you just can't put product out there for the sake of putting product. Like, it needs to be good. And like, you're competing with designers who are trying to make a name for themselves. And yeah, so that was a big thing that pissed me off. And I was like very happy to say that aside from like the flower challenge, everything on mine was sewn. So thank you very much. But yeah, you learn to hide strings and hemlines real fast. And then you start, like, after you make like the 5th or the 6th challenge, you start to realize like, oh wow, I'm not going to use this fabric because it takes a long time to prep, or like there's satins show everything. And like there's young designers who were on the first few challenges that made what I consider like amateur mistakes, and you're like, why did you choose that fabric, you idiot? Because it just takes time. It just takes time to finesse. Yeah.
I think Michael Kors like offered you a job on the spot, if I remember right. I don't think you went to work for him.
No, I didn't.
Right, but did that help propel you into Calvin Klein, or where did you go? I don't know where you went. If that helped you get.
Oh, it seems so long ago. Well, afterward, I went in for an interview with Michael, and we met on like maybe a Thursday or a Friday, and we had a great 3-hour interview, and it was the first time that we had talked outside of the show, like without cameras, and it was very odd. It was very disconcerting to me to be sitting with someone who had been critiquing and basically like forming my career for a month now, 6 months after that, and then he called on Monday and was like, sorry, I don't have a place for you right now. So I'm like, okay, which was like weird. I'm like, why did you say it on national television, buddy? But I'm over that now. And then since then, I just basically sort of had to refocus. And some companies you may know with names, I was at other companies are much smaller, but all of them were like New York based, mostly high-end women's ready-to-wear. So, did you have a question?
Oh, yes. This season, one of the contestants, Kenley, ran into, I think it happened to her a couple of times where she designed a dress and then the judges were like, oh, this has already been done. Like, so-and-so already did this. So you mentioned like you don't look at any, you try not to look at fashion magazines here. So like how, as a designer, what happens to you when you? Let
me reiterate, when I'm designing, because like there's a point, like when you're reading the book, you do design up to the end, but the part where you're thinking of silhouettes, where you're thinking of the beginning phases, what is the story that you're telling? That phase, I don't look at any collections, because that begins to focus like, oh wow, Valentino did this season, or Stella McCartney did this. You don't want to be hindered by that image in the back of your brain. So at that phase, I don't look. But yes, I do look at fashion magazines, but not until I know I'm not susceptible. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like you're like, oh.
If it were to happen to you, like, someone would, oh, this has already been done by, like how.
That's something that young designers, it's something that young designers fight over and over again. I mean, the thing is, a pair of pants is a pair of pants. Like, it's hard to make the smallest little thing yours. And that will happen when you have a base to stand on. So you show collection after collection. You try to find something that no one is doing at the time, or maybe someone hasn't done at the time, when all of a sudden, like, you guys would hear in a fashion magazine or an editorial, like, oh, wow, like, platforms are back. Or, like, platforms weren't invented last season. Or like bangs are the big thing. It's like because a big celebrity wore it at that time, in that moment. So as a designer, you're constantly sort of like watching what's happening in the entertainment world, in the fashion world, what other designers are doing, and you said, no one's really doing this. I'm going to make a statement. And then that's what you sort of become known for. People love to label you. And then you sort of then have a base to stand on, and you grow from there. And then you can start branching into other stuff, and people then recognize your point of view and recognize that as your silhouette. But it's something that young designers have to fight all the time, because there's so many designers out there that it's hard not to make it look like it's been done before. But the same thing with anything, with a website design or with a building, that you say, yeah, there's so many ideas, but there's still so much to do.
So it's kind of a follow-on on that point. As a young designer who is going to come out with his own label, how important is it for people to be able to, I guess, put you in a
box, or there would be some sort of unifying theme that says, okay, I kind of get what he's, what he's trying to, who he's trying to go after, or the kind of look he's looking for, just to kind of differentiate yourself from the clutter.
It's difficult, but that was when I talked about sort of like a point of view, and that's where, as I remember, I was in a meeting with a big editor, a big fashion magazine editor, and I had worked for like 6 months on this project, and I was so proud of it, and I put my blood, sweat, and tears into it, and she was like, flip, 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 flip. Oh, is that all? And to me, I was like, oh my gosh, like this was so hard because it was all my work, and she didn't know the sacrifice I had put into it. And the thing is, she didn't get it. She didn't get what I was doing. It was too overworked, blah, 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 blah. And that was a very big slap in the face where I thought, you know what? Even as a consumer, you can't forget it. People will walk by you in a moment. And as a young designer, it's important to sort of make your statement very clear and very edited from the beginning. And then people will remember you. And I think I was actually talking to my handler on the way here, and we were talking about how people love to put you in that box. And as a designer, it's much easier to start high-end and make $2,500 jackets, for example, and then to do a Target line. Or to have Donna Karan and DKNY, Calvin Klein, CK Jeans, that it's very strategic in how designers do collaborations with that, and it's much easier. I know I wouldn't take a designer that seriously if they were great at doing graphic t-shirts. They do great graphic t-shirts, but I don't know if I'd go to them for like a tux. And I think even with actors, or I remember the example I used was Jim Carrey. And like the first time he did Truman Show, and I'm like, what the hell is he doing? He's a comedic guy. And you just do it, and then you do the next movie, and you do the next movie, and so you do the next collection, and the next collection. Hopefully you build that base to stand on. Does that make sense? Cool.
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, you were standing behind me this whole time. Hello.
Hello, this is Tiffany from Mountain View. Thank you very much for coming to Google.
You're welcome.
I have a question. Where do you shop to get your fabulous clothes? And what was the biggest fashion splurge that you ever purchased for yourself?
Oh, those are good questions. I primarily shop at smaller boutiques in New York, so stores which you may or may not know, like Opening Ceremony, Odin. They're all specialty like men's stores, and I know that at least the only people who would have the similar items are like-minded fashion gays. So that's a good thing. And J. Lindbergh, and the biggest splurge I've ever made, I think was the one that jumps out to me right now was the first time I paid over $1,000 for a suit, and I was like, oh my gosh, and then I put it on, and it just felt so good. And that was, I think that was from J. Lindbergh. Yeah, he's pretty expensive, but he fits tall, lanky, skinny boys, so I love that. Thank you. Yeah.
Kind of following up on her question, with regards to women's clothing, do you have any recommendations for lines or retailers where you can find kind of a more fashion-forward look that's not an extremely high designer price? Because so many times I find myself going to Macy's or Nordstrom's, and I'm just like, I hate all this. Everything looks the same.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to go buy the Sony. So
I think there are in-betweens. You just have to educate yourself and on where they are. And in LA, there are LA designers who do things besides crop tops instead of jeans. And they do exist, and they do sell. But like specifically right here, right now, I don't know if I could give you like an exact boutique because I know New York, but I don't know LA that much. But they do exist because I have friends out here. I have colleagues who design out here. Also, like, don't go to Macy's. Like, don't go to Nordstrom. If you're wanting something new, and don't go to a national retailer. Well, like, you're going to pay Barney's prices, but you'll also get Barney's selection. And that's sort of the high-low end. Do you guys have a Barney's co-op out here? That's a great idea. And also, like, there's people like J. Crew. Like, I love what J. Crew's been doing for women lately. I think they do really cute fashion pieces, and I think it's about sort of taking that style and taking the suitable jacket that's in a great color that you can pair with something that's a little more avant-garde and making it your personal style. So I don't think one-stop shopping, I don't think you're ever going to find it, even at Barney's, for example. I think it's more about taking the time to do a little homework, spend a day going shopping and trying all those small boutiques and just going through the racks.
I'll go with you.
Let's all go. Let's go, yeah. I love a fashion day. Yeah.
How often so you have your vision, and then at the point at which it's getting ready to go out and be made, how often do you need to make, concessions or significant concessions about, I really wanted this fabric, but, I can't do that, or like, what made me think about this is when, before you were talking about buttons, and people always say this, buttons are so important, and every time you buy something, the second time it comes back from the dry cleaner,
the buttons are falling off.
And so you kind of hear people saying about this, but I also understand that there are economies that you have to kind of deal with. How has that impacted you?
I mean, it's a huge question because it really can go in a lot of different ways, but things like fabrics, like when I'm fabric buying, and I know that there's a great print, or say like I want to do a stripe, like this guy has on his shirt, and it's like, that may be Ralph Lauren's stripe, and he's going to blow that up around the world, and it's going to be everywhere. And then there's Daniel Vosovic, who's doing the Ralph Lauren stripe, even though we bought it at the same time. It doesn't matter. And that's been very difficult with a young designer is we don't have necessarily the financial backing to work with a factory to make a specific fabric just for us. Our orders are a lot smaller. And that's why I love working with like young textile designers so that they can give you something that's different without jumping all the way in, because I don't have Ralph Lauren's, budget. And then I think there's a lot of stuff you concede a lot, or you deal with a lot of battles every day. Pattern maker will come back and say, I can't do this sleeve. I can't. And you're so, well, you did it last season. I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. I can't do it. It's too much. It's making the jacket too expensive in this fabric, blah, blah, blah. And you have to then fight to get that little thing or this silhouette. Or a buyer may say, pockets in evening gowns. We love it. Everyone wants the pockets. Everyone wants the pockets. Then a month later, they come back and they say, the women think they look fat, they're hippie, no pockets, cut out all the pockets. And that's something that you like, okay. And it's a back and forth, low rise, up rise, boot cut, blah, 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 and it just goes back and forth. And in the end of the day, you do what I always tell young designers, do what you do best, because no one is going to be one-stop shopping for everyone. And even people in this room where, it's like you could lump you guys into a certain category, but individually, no one is ever going to make the same choice, and you're not all going to shop at the same store. So, young designers, don't try to be something to everyone. I thought I saw another hand raised at the time. No? Oh yeah, sorry.
Kind of similar practical.
Oh sure.
Okay, similar practical question. We're all very practical here. I figured in figuring out your new line that you're going to come out, you have to go all over and find out where to get your clothes made, where the best places are. I'm wondering, just kind of a practical. We all see our clothes and we go, oh, this is made in Bangladesh, this is made in whatever, this is made in China. Whatever.
Yeah.
Where do you think the best clothes are made?
After living in Italy and I went to the Gucci factory and walked around for 3 hours, and I saw those bags being made by hand by one person makes an entire bag. It's not a factory line. That one person cuts the leather, and that same person then takes it to be treated, they work the pattern, they do the sewing machine. There's a reason why that bag is as expensive as it is. Yes, there's a name to it, but I know, having going to the Chanel studio in Paris and seeing 65-year-old women sewing this dress, and it was like the 3rd week they had been working on it, and working on those beads, that someone may or may not ever see that dress. I don't know who that woman is who buys that $25,000 dress. But there's so much time and patience that went into that, and that's obviously the extreme version. but just the fact that I know after living in Italy as well, that the preparation is much more respected in certain areas, in certain countries, and the process is much more respected. And like I said, even about eating dinner and enjoying your food and knowing where it came from. And I think with young designers using like sustainable fabrics, having an understanding and respect of the product and where it came from and where it's going, I think is something that all of us should be aware of. And I think fashion is definitely looked on as a very frivolous thing. And I think it's important, though, for young designers to take that helm and say, you know what, like, we also can be really responsible. So yeah, but to begin, I am producing in New York, just because you have a better eye as to what's happening, so I don't get a shirt back with 3 sleeves, because, you know, and believe me, it's happened. It's happened, because I don't speak, Taiwanese, or I don't speak Cambodian, or, you know. Sorry. Was there one more question at all? No? Okay, last one. Yeah.
So those moments where you're like, blood, sweat, and tears, and you've shown that book to this person, and they're like, I don't get it.
I don't get it.
Yeah. How, like, do you just go back and start over, or you just so believe in that idea that you just kind of stick with it and find the person that is?
Best advice I ever received, and it's in the book, and James Houston, who is a fashion photographer, told it to me, and he said, when I started to make real progress in my work is when I separated myself from the product. She does not mean I'm a bad person. She doesn't mean that I'm a bad designer necessarily. She just doesn't get the product right then. She doesn't get my ideas. And I think for anyone to move forward, and that's we're going to have a Dr. Phil moment, like in a relationship. Like if you don't learn anything from what happened in the past, you're never going to move forward. So I can bitch and complain and be like, oh, she doesn't get what I do, or I can learn from it and digest it and choose to either keep it in my head or to spit it back out and forget it. And that's something that's going to hopefully keep me as a designer sustainable for decades and decades, because believe me, I guarantee that maybe you guys keep watching, but maybe this first collection is going to be a hit. Maybe it might be a miss. So we just don't know. And that's what I love about fashion. It's so scary. Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for coming. I hope you guys enjoyed it. So.